Welcome to this meeting of the Inverclyde Council and Police and Fire Service and Rescue Scrutiny Committee. Do we have any apologies?
Convener, we have an apology from Councillor Brennan to be substituted by Councillor McKay. Move to roll call.
Yes, please.
The following councillors please indicate if they're present at the meeting. Councillor Clockerty.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Crowther.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Daisley.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Law.
Present in chamber.
Councillor McKay.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Maguire.
Present remotely.
Provost Mackenzie.
In the chamber.
Councillor Moran.
In the chamber.
Councillor Quinn.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Wilson.
Present in the chamber.
Are there any declarations of interest?
I shall read the opening statement. Welcome to this meeting of Inverclyde Council's Police and Fire and Rescue Scrutiny Panel. This meeting has been held remotely and also in person and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcasts available through the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with Council's published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meeting protocols, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invites to the meeting. Thank you, everybody. We've already met before with the Fire Brigade Union, which I think was a very useful exercise. We now move on to new business. Agenda item number 2, police officer numbers, national picture. Ruth.
So good afternoon, everyone, and this is an emergency meeting of the local police and fire scrutiny panel, specifically requested by the Fire Brigade Union on the back of the Strategic Service Review Programme, but also the convener noted that implications for budget positions and in contrast, the role of the local police and fire scrutiny is to make sure that what's happening nationally we need to look at what's happening in the local picture and make sure that any national decisions don't interfere with the service that we will get in Inverclyde. And it's your job as a panel to scrutinise the police and fire service to make sure that we're getting the best service possible. So on that note, we've been asked to look at both police and Scottish Fire and Rescue, and thank you to Ross Scullion who's pulled together the report of the what officers know of the national picture. So you'll have read the report in agenda item number 2. It's looking at particularly the number of police officers in Scotland and the national picture. And I'll hand over to Laura Waddle to perhaps tell us how this may impact us on a local level and what is known.
Welcome to you, Superintendent. She's assisted today by Chief Inspector Damien. Okay. I know it's Kay, right? So it's usually personally.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, everyone. So, just to kind of refresh everybody's memory in terms of our Chief Constable attended the FP board back on the 23rd of March. And at that time, it was to discuss our budget. Basically, at that board meeting, he advised that our establishment at that time, which had been 17,234 previously, had reduced through natural retirals and resignations down to 16,600, and that we had been running with a number of vacancies for a period of time at that time. Now, in terms of the budget that had been allocated by the Scottish Government, the decision was thereafter taken that along with the pay award that Police Scotland had received at 5%, that those numbers for our establishment moving forward would need to remain at 16,600 police officers and taking into account the budgetary constraints. So since that time, we have been looking at assessing the demand, and that demand comes from our communities, it comes from our partners, but we also have modified officers that work within the police service as well. And we've been looking to review their roles and make sure that we have suitable roles for them moving forward, and what services that we are able to deliver both nationally, regionally and locally. Now, it was quite clear at that time that difficult decisions would need to be made, and that we couldn't keep doing things as we are with the reduction in our establishment, but that there would be no compulsory redundancies as part of that, and although we would look to reduce in time our staff roles and numbers as well, that these staff roles would not be backfilled by police officers, and he was quite clear on that. And clearly that will all involve consultation with the trade unions at the appropriate time. In terms of the reduction of police officer numbers, that will be managed through recruitment intakes, retirements and resignations. And since then, there has been a resource prioritisation strategic group has been set up, and that's jointly chaired by Mr David Page and DCC Malcolm Graham. Sitting underneath that are tactical groups and operational groups established under Director Miller and ACC Gary Ritchie, who manage that prioritisation group. Local policing, I'm happy to say, is to remain a priority for the Chief moving forward in terms of this work that's ongoing, and emergency response will remain a high priority as we move forward. So I've got a very short presentation, and I wonder, Colin, if you could perhaps bring up the slides. There's only 5 slides, if we could work our way through them. Basically, we have been working for some time on what's called the Local Policing Service Delivery Review, and this is a presentation that was provided to COSLA as well. I mean, through that, if you can move on to the first page, Colin, please. Through that, we've been trying to understand why our demand has been ever increasing. We're finding that it's more complex calls that we're attending, and there's an increase in the volume of high-risk calls. And partly that's due to the evolution of crime. We already had at this scrutiny spotlight on cybercrime, and you got to understand, members got to understand and appreciate the complexity around about the cyber-enabled crime that we're now facing, and the new capabilities that we require to be able to police in that space. But also we need to understand the expectations of the communities, and clearly we do not want to reduce any services to the communities across, I'm responsible for Renfrewshire and Inverclyde Division, but across Scotland as well. However, we do need to try and look to see how we're going to proactively enhance our proactive capability and our preventative measures that we can put in place across communities, because that's vital in terms of public confidence, but also vital in terms of reducing some of that demand. We can't continually be reactionary to things. We actually need to be able to move into the space of being proactive in that space. And if you can move on, Colin. So the vision then, and comes about as part of the Police and Fire Reform Act of 2012, is very much to improve the safety and wellbeing of people, places and our communities. We need to have an agile force that's innovative and effective, and we are currently in the discovery phase. So we're looking at N Division, which you can see on the map of Scotland there in the kind of mid blue colour, and C Division. So N Division being up in the Highlands, C Division being Forth Valley. We're doing a discovery phase at present round about these divisions in terms of what that demand looks like, and to capture any learning that we can thereafter look at across the country. Every divisional commander receives a fortnightly update in terms of how that service delivery review is ongoing. And the ambition of it then is to identify common approaches, look for synergies and much better ways of collaborating, both internally across the organisation, but also with our police. And in fact, there's a joint statement has just been released today in terms of that need for greater collaboration across Police Scotland, Fire and Rescue Service, Unison and Unite, which I'm sure colleagues in the Fire Service will speak a bit more about in due course. But in terms of that collaborative work, and that's obviously been ongoing for some time, but we are looking at it both across local policing, but also across our national divisions as well, and our enabling services, things like our fleet, estate, etc., and bringing our key partners and communities on board in that journey, and obviously yourselves will be part of that journey as well. But ultimately, we are looking at the moment through the service delivery review to understand the problem and thereafter design a solution to that problem at the moment. And if we can move on to the next slide, Colin. So we've looked at this 3 horizon framework, understanding what the as is for Police Scotland at the moment, and what that innovation is going to look like for the future and that emerging future. And again, if we can just move on to the final slide. So in terms of the products and the outputs from that, we're looking to have a consolidated view of the as is, and we're getting that through the discovery phase of A division and C division being a similar size currently to K division. We're looking at a target operating model specifically for local policing, and looking to define problems that are seen across the country and how we're going to deal with them and examine them in greater detail for the future. And thereafter there will be further follow-up phases. So that gives you a bit of a flavour of the local policing service delivery review that, as I say, has been provided to COSLA. Before I move on, Damien, is there anything else you want to add in that space?
No, so comparing the Commander's covered the national picture, but put in local context. Commander pointed out, C division is pretty similar size, it's relatively similar geography to the we cover, so we'll take a lot of learning. That's why C and N division were pretty. One's very rural and one's quite similar to where we are now, so we'll take the best practice in both areas. And we'll probably try and learn from the national picture, but some of the collaboration that's been discussed, what the Commander mentioned in a joint statement, will be put out publicly in relation to police and Scottish Fire and Rescue, discussing the best way forward, looking at increased collaboration. That's a national thing, but as most of you will know, a lot of the elected members present or visiting the partnership of locally, but we are actually quite ahead of the game in terms of working well with partners, local authority, HSCP and other partners. I think the national one is more about pushing towards greater collaboration between police and Scottish Fire and Rescue. I'm sure you all know, and my colleagues to my left will confirm we already have great working relationships, so we're kind of building some of the work we've already done locally.
Thanks, Damien. So in terms of what does that mean then for K division? The establishment reduction for K division has been 17 police officer posts. Now
17
yeah.
across the whole division.
Across the whole division, convener, yes.
16 Renfrewshire and 1 Inverclyde.
Well, I'll come to that if that's okay. So we were advised at the end of March in terms of the establishment reduction, and we were given very short time scales in terms of where those posts came from. K division at that time was running with a number of vacancies, and we were awaiting an intake of probationary constables coming into the division. And the vacant posts are where the posts fell at that stage. Now, those vacant posts are spread across the division, both in Inverclyde and Renfrewshire, but the split of them just now, in terms of the posts that have been deleted, will not be where the posts are moving forward. So we need to do a lot of work in the background, first of all, to understand the greater demand that we are facing and understand where our capacity, we can build on capacity, and also look to see what our target operating model is going to look like for the future. A lot of that work is ongoing, and whilst I'm happy to reference some of it just now, I think it's important to highlight none of that work's completed as yet, so I won't be able to give you the exact figures of what the impact in Inverclyde is at this time, but in due course in the future then obviously I will be able to do that. In terms of as I said at the outset, this is going to be managed through retirals, resignations, and natural transfers within the organisation, and that's how we will maintain our new establishment. Within the division, we have a daily tasking process at our morning meeting, and that gives us an opportunity to task into national resources as well as our local resources. And I think that's particularly important with the work that we've done in Inverclyde on the back of the tragic murder and the tugboat sinking. That wasn't just K division that responded to those incidents, that I pulled resources in from road policing, from operational support division in terms of the marine dive unit, in terms of firearms officers, and so the list goes on. You've probably seen the Mounted Branch and various others within the Inverclyde area. And it's important to recognise that regardless of these reductions, we will continue to be able to do that and pull our national resources in to assist us as required. I also obviously have the capability to be able to flex resources across the division. So when a certain council area is experiencing high demand or a high profile incident, then I will obviously be pulling resources from other parts of the division, whether it be specialist or other areas across the key division, to be able to assist that particular issue that we're dealing with at that moment in time. In terms of, we've already delivered on an intelligence review, and that was completed 6 months ago. That's a national piece of work, and actually we're just about to commence an evaluation process around about that to make sure that that's fit for purpose. So none of this will be brought in without clear evaluation and in terms of ensuring that it's actually fit for purpose for the future. There's also a public protection review that's ongoing nationally as well, and we've been fortunate enough in Key Division to already have had a public protection demand review, and that highlighted the increasing demand that we have in the public protection area, and we've been able to put additional resources into it to be able to deal with that, particularly around about the threat, risk and harm that these types of investigations involve. As a region in the West, we've been looking at a new shift pattern, and that's been out for consultation, and it's 2, 2 and 2, so 2 day shift, 2 late shift and 2 night shift, and then officers would receive 4 days off, so that's in train at the moment, and the analysis of the consultation is ongoing just now as well. We're working very closely with criminal justice partners. We have a lot of demand through delivering citations, attendance at court for officers, and we're looking at ways that we can make that much more efficient in terms of the criminal justice process in order to free up officer time in terms of actually serving the communities, which is the main crux of their role and what they actually want to do. We've put a dedicated member of staff into the Fiscal's office, and they cover between Paisley and Greenock. And again, that's looking at the demand on police witnesses and trying to reduce that as best we can. We're in the midst of a review of modified officers to make sure that we've got them doing the most meaningful roles that we can. We're also working very closely with our criminal justice custody colleagues in order to ensure that, again, the demand that's placed on custody, that it's not negatively impacting across the division. We have a partnership superintendent. I believe she attended the last scrutiny, and actually Lorna Gibson has been allocated 2 pieces of work in terms of looking at our mental health demand and how we can work better with partners to try and reduce some of that. Again, freeing up resources to be able to serve the communities, and also our missing people. We have a high demand from missing people that we're working closely with as well to, again, work with partners to try and reduce that. We've got a community policing team review ongoing. One of the area commanders for Renfrewshire, Willie Graham, he's leading on a shift change that will give us greater capacity, and Damien leading on what the remit and the role of our community police officers will look like for the future. We've got an away day planned with L Division at the end of this week, and that's to look at things like our business units. What else can we do more efficiently across 2 divisions, so that, again, we can free up some resource. We are about to receive CAUS, which is the core operating solution, and will replace the legacy crime management system, which has been in, I think it was implemented in 1995, so you can imagine the capability of a computer system that was implemented so long ago. So CAUS will be much more interactive, prevent double keying, and again reduce a lot of officer time in terms of paperwork and admin that they currently do. We're also looking at our estate and how best that we look at our estate, and whether or not in the future it would be great to be able to collaborate with partners and have a single estate there. And just finally, in terms of the kind of national pieces, the ACCs all have work streams now, whether it be around about our people in our workforce. They've got various portfolios, very wide-ranging portfolios, but specifically about our reduction in establishment. One is leading on people in our workforce and the reallocation. One is looking at our demand reduction and capacity creation, and one is looking at criminal justice reform. So there is an awful lot of work ongoing and in train at present that I'll be able to bring back to elected members and yourself, convener, in due course, to give you a better understanding of where we're at.
Thank you, Laura. I do understand that you'll be working on the figures, and we'll get that to a future scrutiny panel. I quite understand that. I think I would particularly like to thank you for the exercise you conducted in Larkfield, the multi-departmental exercise, running from the firearms police right through to the mounted police. It was very successful and was very noticed. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Damien, were you able to handle the people that were brought to your desk?
No, I'm still behind the desk now, Kim. Then I wasn't out on the ground, but the cops did a great job. And as the commander said, there was a lot of local cops involved, but with a lot of support from national teams as well. So it worked very well.
Yes, thank you. Any questions, colleagues? Councillor McCabe.
Yes, I know I'm only a substitute, but if you don't mind, mate.
Sorry?
I know I'm only a substitute, but if you don't mind, mate.
No, that gives you a certain equality.
Thank you very much. Very helpful update, Laura. I think it would be useful to get a comprehensive report on those initiatives, because obviously, just looking at the sort of high level stuff in the report, look, you do have some concerns. I mean, and you highlighted, for example, Laura, I was going to ask you a question about the whole mental health demand. And clearly that's a bit of a national issue as well, very, very hot topic, and in a sense, police clearly have a very vital role, and it's important, I suppose, the demands are not shunted on to other services that can't cope either.
Yes.
With supporting people with mental health issues. But I suppose in terms of the question, we're all dealing with budget cuts. We've made very difficult decisions, and I'll get more difficult decisions to make. We've reduced the number of community wardens reluctantly as well, which obviously impacts on the totality of the resource available locally. It was to understand how, in a sense, the national service determines how many police officers are allocated to each division. What's the rationale for it? Clearly, there was a political commitment previously to deliver 1,000 extra police officers, and that's simply not going to happen anymore. And on the current trajectory, we're going to fall below 16,600 as well. But it was to understand if the national resource is 16,600, how is that allocated across the different divisions, recognising the different demands within each division?
Really good question. So in terms of, there is a bit of science applied to it. Now, I don't pertain to be an expert in that science, but we have very good analysts that work in Police Scotland, within Police Scotland, who analyse obviously all our call data, our incidents, our crimes, and any added vulnerabilities through our our interim vulnerable persons database, for example. And that's how they then determine and work out what each division should have in terms of that establishment as best they can, along with the national divisions. And I think it's important to recognise that that can be a moving picture, because new crimes like spiking that we saw a couple of years ago came into the forefront. Hadn't really been much of an issue for Scotland at that time, and it became an issue, and clearly there was a lot of concern from people reporting issues like from spiking, and so you're seeing an increase in demand there that we hadn't anticipated. So in terms of the national divisions in particular, that can be a moving picture, and continually reassess, but there is, to give you that comfort and reassurance, hopefully there is some science put at the back of it in terms of that allocation.
And just if you as a divisional commander, that you're comfortable that you're getting a fair share of resources?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McGill?
Yeah.
I'll take Natasha now, please.
Councillor Wilson, Councillor McCabe has stolen the questions and gotten the answers already, so I won't rehash them.
Sorry?
No, it's fine.
She's
Responded to.
Yes. Sorry, Councillor McCabe asked my questions, Councillor Wilson, so I won't re-ask them. Thank you.
Councillor Moran.
Aye, thanks, Convener. And obviously, it's a good report from Laura and Damien, and obviously, we fully understand it, the situation Police Scotland, because we face it every day ourselves as a council. I've got a couple of specific questions you might not be able to answer me. It's about the property repair and maintenance. It's saying that it's just down to the health and safety maintenance at the moment, private 2, which is not acceptable to the police. My question would be where does the Greenock Police Station, what category does that fall under? As someone who is an old campaigner and seen so many of the services we had in Greenock, I'm not going to go through them all, but you know them all, and we lost them. But the one thing we did hang on to was our police station. But it's going to put you a look at the estate going forward. Is there any intelligence regarding the future of the Greenock police station going forward? Is it going to be looked at as part of the wider estate procurement? Have looked at it, so obviously it's a very parochial question, but I'm a parochial man, so I'm asking it. So that would be the question for you.
Laura or Damien?
Thanks, Councillor. So I actually met with the estates project lead last week. So as you know, our estate isn't very great in some areas across Scotland, and we've been working hard across Scotland to fix that. Greenock is next on the list. It is actively being looked at just now, but it will not move out with the area, the general area. We've agreed that already. So we've been looking at various sites across Greenock in terms of suitability. There is nothing in place as yet in terms of anything, but we're speaking with the council in relation to potential future sites, because the office that we have at Greenock at the moment, was built, I think, in the 60s. It's no longer what we need for a modern police station, and so we need to find something better that would work both for our officers but also for our community. So I can give you the reassurance that that office will remain, but just probably not on the current site.
Oh, thank you. Very
Good
reassuring.
question.
Yes, thank you.
Kirsty, Councillor Law.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, you mentioned about high priority things. I just wanted to know, what would you deem as things that are not as high a priority, and have they been impacted as a result of your less staff numbers?
So in terms of high priority, what we're talking about is the 999 calls. So there's an absolute commitment. If there's a 999 call, we will absolutely, drop everything as best we can to go to that. In terms of those kind of lower level calls, if I can call them that, we're still trying to look at that in terms of, because every call has an impact. It has an impact on an individual, a family, a community, and that's where, looking at our demand and our capacity, there's no decisions have been made yet as to what we won't attend if we ever get to that stage. I know in England and Wales they have got to that stage, and I know that ACC Ritchie gave a commitment, for example, around about mental health calls, that would not be a position that Police Scotland would be taking, that would be refusing to attend mental health calls. So if you can bear with us just now in terms of what that work looks like, but that's, I think, we are building the capacity with our partners, becoming more efficient and trying to collaborate better, to increase that capacity so that we actually don't stop going to anything, and there's no reduction in service, but I can't guarantee that at this moment in time until we do that work.
Sure. And have you noticed that have an effect on the other public services in terms of maybe like ambulances not responding and things having an effect on your ability to answer calls to?
I think, as has been highlighted by various councillors, we're all undergoing budgetary cuts, and we're all trying to do the best that we can, and assist each other and support each other as best we can. It's clear that, we've seen it in the media, ambulances in queues waiting to get into hospitals, no beds in hospitals. So, undoubtedly they're feeling the pressure. We're certainly feeling the pressure in terms of the volume of calls, and the increase that I spoke about round about, increased demand for us round about mental health calls, etc. So I wouldn't like to say any particular agency is causing us any increased demand. I think across society we're all feeling an increase, and probably equally feeling that increase, if I'm honest.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Chris. Travis.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. To follow on from Councillor Moran's question about the condition of Greenock Police Station, the anecdotal evidence is also that from the fire service that the stations within Inverclyde are of a similar, if not older, age, Would there be any chance of any joined up thinking between the police service and the fire service, and perhaps even the ambulance service, to have one major unit within Inverclyde? Is that possible?
Absolutely. David and I spoke about that at a recent catch-up, to be honest, and how great that would be to have a hub like that. And again, it's something I've mentioned to Alan Harris just about potential sites that we've spoken about. David knows the area much better than I do. And that's certainly also on the agenda. You know, there is nothing off the agenda at the moment while we do the discovery phase, to use the language earlier, in terms of what's the art of the possible for us all moving forward, because you know, we can see real benefits of actually even just putting one police officer into the fiscal's office, of actually that police officer being able to go and have a conversation rather than an email being sent or a phone call being made. You know, that collaboration of being able to speak to people and actually do our work jointly and much more efficiently. We can all see the benefits of that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Clopperty.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Many people in this room will be definitely heartbroken to hear about that beautiful building, which is the Greenhill Post police station, that is under threat. I'll do it quickly before somebody decides to put an A rating on it for that building. I suppose it stems from that. Obviously, we had the X division here, so we're X division. We've got all the numbers here nationally, and I've spoken about this before. We've spoken about things that have been removed from Inverclyde and the police responsibilities in Inverclyde Departments and stuff like that. But if I was to say to you, we've got numbers here from 2007 to 2023. If I was saying to you, can you give me the numbers for Inverclyde officers, given the notable asterisks about this is when this happened and this is when that happened? Have you got those figures that you can provide for us? Because that would give us the reassurance that Inverclyde is still being placed the level that we think it should be placed to, and I was hoping for those figures we provided to us.
I don't have it today, but what I will do is go away and have a look and see if I can find that for you. And if I can, then I don't see any problem with sharing that.
Okay,
thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? Councillor McCabe, you're getting two questions.
Thanks very much. You're very generous to the chair. I was just, I suppose, to follow up the discussion just had there about sort of the co-location of services. Now, we've been talking about replacing Greenhill police stations since I was a boy. Definitely honest. Yeah, maybe not as long as that, but certainly as long as I've been a councillor. And the challenge has always been the resources. And I don't get a sense that capital funding is any more available today than it was 10 years ago. It's probably less available, and we're seeing similar pressures across I suppose, the range of the Scottish public service, local college, struggling to get resources to build a new campus, etc. So I would hope if there's a potential for the blue-light services to engage with each other, but engage potentially with the council as well. Because we, in a sense, do have access to funding mechanisms that are not available to other public services. So I think if we can think out the box, and I know, for example, in terms of other areas, Livingston being an example of a public complex which was built by the council, but obviously leased to other partners who would pay a rent for it, etc. So it's something I think we need a bit of imagination, not just around the site and the location, but potentially how we would fund it. And I would hope, obviously, we can engage with yourselves on that.
Absolutely, Councillor, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Quinn. Sorry for taking so long.
It's not invisible today. The problem invisible light folk for the next question. So I've just got a question about consultation. Obviously, we've really welcomed the open and frank conversation here and find out what's going on, but obviously a lot of that is still uncertain with the fine detail. So my questions are around consultation. So what's that going to look like from, especially from us as a local area? You've already mentioned partners, obviously there'll be consultation with partners, but the public as well as us as a scrutiny board. Sometimes we get the decision arriving here as a scrutiny panel and we have very limited opportunity to unpick the detail on what that poses a risk to our community. Thank you.
No, absolutely, and again, really valid question in terms of that. As we start to work through, as you know, we're bringing spotlights to scrutiny on a regular basis. I would envisage then, once we've worked through any pieces of work, then we bring that back, particularly on that local level, to let you understand what that would look like, what it would mean for Inverclyde, and give you the opportunity to comment and feedback in terms of your own thoughts, because we don't have all the answers ultimately, and it's great to get others' feedback in terms of, you know, helping us to form what the target operating model, for example, is going to look like for the future, etc. You know, we'll certainly be sitting with all the data, but getting that more holistic view of how you think it would work in the communities would be really helpful. Thanks.
Okay. I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Laura, for being so open with us. I think that was extremely informative. Damien, thank you for the job you do in keeping us safe and keeping our constituents safe. And thank you again for the operation in Latfield. It had a great impression upon all of us. You are ready to leave now.
Oh no, I would like to stay. Thanks.
Would
If
you
that's
like to
okay.
stay?
If
Right.
that's okay with you.
Sorry?
If that's okay with you.
Of course it's okay, Chief Superintendent.
We've never chased anybody away, you want.
Sorry?
We never chased anyone away.
No. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item number 3. Ruth.
I'll introduce this one, convener, and then hand over to my colleagues David McCarry and Paul Story, who are here to answer any questions. But this is the paper in response to the Strategic Service Review Programme, and you'll see in the contents of the paper the use of the Community Risk Index model to take forward the service review. Particularly the appliance we're talking about is the high level and the high reach appliance, and what that will look like as a strategy going forward, and also the local support and delivery and how that will be taken forward. But I'll hand over to David McCarry to perhaps give some more details around that.
Thank you, Ruth. David, thank you for waiting this time.
Thanks, Chair. You'll see all the detail in the paper around Community Risk Index model and service delivery model programme. So whilst I could talk through that from a local context, we thought it would have value in inviting along one of the SDMP team today, Group Commander Mark Lloyd. The SDMP team have been looking at this data for the last 4 years, since April 2019, and whilst the service delivery model programme wasn't directly linked to what we're calling the Service Strategic Review Programme, that information and that data that Mark and the team have gathered, along with independent review bodies, have informed the process that we find ourselves in 2023. So the proactive work that's been done since 2019, while it's not specifically linked to this, has allowed the organisation to analyse that data. If you allow me, I'll bring in Mark to take you through the thought process, the data and the decision making that's brought us up to that. And then after that, in terms of the paper, Paul and I are more than happy to answer any questions on that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. As David said, I'm one of the project managers within our service delivery programme that's been running since 2019, and I'm specifically looking at our, the disposal of our stations and the duty systems that we use to crew those across the country. So what I'm going to do is I've got a slide to share with you that will show you the process we've gone through, and I'll talk through each of the sections as we go. So just give me a second, I'll get that up. And hopefully you can see that now. Is that visible, please?
Yes, that's visible.
That's great. Thank you very much. So, as David's referred to, we've got a thing called the Community Risk Index model, and that's a model we've developed to understand what the fire and rescue risk looks like across the whole of Scotland. You'll appreciate that 10 years ago we came from 8 services into a single service. Each service did its own assessment of risk and distributed its resources according to its capabilities at the time. But we didn't have a full view of what community risk looked like across the whole country. So what we've done is we've taken 5 years worth of incident data, and the data that we looked at has been 2015 to 2020, just prior to the COVID period. Obviously, the COVID period has thrown up its own difficulties, and we have looked at that as well. And we're just
Mark,
about to.
Mark,
Sorry.
apologies to interrupt. You're just breaking up slightly, and I wonder if it might be easily redeemable by just putting your microphone closer to your mouth.
Yeah, I'll try that. Can you hear us any better?
Yes, that seems a bit better.
Okay, Kirsten?
Yep. Okay. So what we did with the community risk index model is we've taken 5 years worth of incident data, and we've kind of superimposed that with other data. So we've looked at the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation and other socioeconomic data that allows us to drill down right down to postcode level and understand, where our incidents are occurring and what kind of communities they're occurring in, etc. So it gives us a fairly good, in fact, a very good understanding of incident occurrences. And then what we did was we developed a statistical algorithm in collaboration with the University of Edinburgh, which pulls all that data together, and it basically pulls out a risk index.
I'm not getting it. You're still struggling over here.
Okay.
Mark, Ruth here again. It seems to be when you're saying whole sentences, it's breaking up.
Okay.
Do you want to try maybe turning off your camera, see if we get a better signal, and also maybe speaking a wee bit slower, and maybe we'll be able to pick up more of what you're saying. I'm picking up some of it, but not all of it.
The headset, I think.
Or if you could even, have you got a microphone instead of the headset?
That's the best I've got, I'm afraid. It usually works fine, so it must be to do with bandwidth. Hang on, I'll try and turn off my camera. I'm not used to this platform for operating, so I'm trying to work out how to turn the camera. Apologies, I'm really struggling to see where the camera settings are on this. Stop video. Okay, that's the video stopped.
Take your time.
Are you hearing me any better? Because it's my video turned off.
It's still breaking up. It does feel like the headset. It's as you go into full sentences that it's just picking up sort of 8/10, I would say, of what you're saying. We'll stick with it if that's okay with folks.
Sure.
Maybe try and speak a wee bit slower. And,
yep.
Yeah, and we'll stick with it until we can't go any further, if that's okay.
Okay. So what the community risk index model produces is for every data zone across the whole of Scotland, it produces a risk index. So between very low to very high, so 5 levels.
Mark, it's Ruth here again. But
It's still not happening.
Yeah, it's almost worse. I think all that's available to him is the headset at the moment.
Yeah.
Mark, is that an option for you to pull out the headset completely and just use the microphone on your desktop?
I don't have a desktop microphone, it's built into my headset. This is a new headset as well, so it should be good. But what I can do is I can try using a different microphone and see if that works any better.
If we could give it a couple of minutes, because we're very interested in what you have to say, and it's very important that we hear that as well. So could you perhaps give it a couple of minutes for you to swap microphones, if that's okay?
David Push, could you talk us through the slides?
I won't give you the same level of detail with Mark and I'm the chair. I've got the speaker.
You got the gist of it?
Yeah.
You would give Mark a couple of minutes.
Give Mark a couple of minutes. And then we've got a reserve.
The only other option would be to give him a telephone call, put it through a speaker.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark, for the time, Chair, to get his microphones working. I wanted one of the STMP teams to speak to you just to give you that comfort that this has been a collective effort from the team, not just internally to fire and rescue, but externally in terms of independent bodies to inform this process. Like I say, it's not been directly linked to the Strategic Service Review Programme, but it has borne fruit in the sense that when we come to the position we find ourselves in 2023-24, then at least we have both 5 years of data from the position from 2015 to 2020, and also a separate look at service delivery.
Well, you hear me now? I'm on a different headset.
Yeah.
Sounds about
Let's give that a try. Of course, a different headset, maybe he's not got, he can't hear. Mark, can you hear us? Call the computers in the chat, see if we can turn on his speakers.
Pretty sure what happened there.
Yeah, just.
Mark, we're unsure if you're there, but if you can hear us. Maybe. It sounds like you've got a better microphone, but the speakers aren't working.
Hello?
Hello, Mark, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me any better?
Yes. That sounds much better.
Okay, good. There it is. Yes, I was telling you about the CRIM and explaining that there's a lot of data that goes into that at data zone level. So we're looking at historic incident data, but also socioeconomic data, and that we've developed the model in collaboration with the University of Edinburgh initially, and now we've moved on to do some additional work with the University of Nottingham. And we're basically looking to produce an enhanced version of the CRIM, and we're working through that just now. We're hoping to have that towards the end of September. But what that does is it produces a risk metric for every data zone across the whole of Scotland, from very low to very high across 5 different bands. So that's what that does. So it's allowed us for the first time to see what the fire and rescue risk pattern looks like across the whole of the country. The other thing we've done on my project specifically we're looking at was looking at, what's the dispersion of our fire stations, so how many fire engines have we got at each fire station? What duty systems are we using to crew those? What are the incident numbers that each station typically attends? And when do those incidents occur as well? And that has been looked at by time of the day, by day of the week, by month of the year. So we have a really good understanding of what each of our stations is doing. And it also allows us to do like-for-like comparisons across our station types. And through that, what we've been able to identify is some potential imbalances in terms of our resource distribution, given the number of resources that we have in different localities. The next thing we've done is look at incident response times. In Scotland, we don't have a statutory requirement to publish any response standards. That was a requirement about 20 years ago when we used to have the standards of fire cover, but that's long been done away with. And each legacy service had their own kind of view as to what kind of response standards they would like to achieve. So to resolve that situation, what we've had to do is look at the whole of Scotland and understand how we're responding to similar types of locality. So we've used the Scottish 8-fold urban-rural classification, and that divides Scotland into large urban, other urban, and various small town and rural classifications. And then we took a 5-year sample of our actual responses and said, well, what are our typical responses, average responses to each of these urban rural classifications? And we've basically used those now as a benchmark for our first and second pump responses. So typically what we find with the response times is that in the more urbanized areas, we have a quicker response to the rural areas. And that's entirely down to the fact that our urbanized areas are predominantly served by full-time fire stations rather than the on-call stations. But we do have a mixture in some areas, including in Clyde. The next thing we did was we've employed ORH, it's a company called Operational Research in Health. What they've done is they've built an operational response model. So they've taken a lot of data about how the service works on a day-to-day basis and created a system that looks at all our current stations, pumps, duty systems, It's got all the data zones, complete with the risk metrics that we've identified. It's got 5 years worth of incident data and 3 years worth of on-call pump availability data. And it includes all the geographic infrastructure that you'd expect in terms of the road network, the administrative areas, etc. So we can ask it various questions about changing or the current dispersion of our resources. So once we had the model up and running, we've then used it to identify where the potential resource imbalances look in terms of their model, not just looking at the incident numbers, etc., and the demand. So what's happened there is, we tried redistributing all our current resources to best fit the underlying risk, and we got an output round about that suggested some potential imbalances. And we've also assessed our first and second pump response bench times again using that same model. And just to give you some kind of context for the Inverclyde area, and particularly around about Greenock, some of the things that have come out of that modelling is that when we look at the number of incidents attended by our stations that have got 2 whole-time pumps, Greenock typically sits about 32nd to 34th, busiest out of 38. So it's certainly down towards the bottom end in terms of number of incidents. And that more aligns with places like Johnston and Barrhead, where we've actually only got 1 whole-time pump as opposed to 2 in Greenock. And similarly, when we look at incident time, so the time actually spent at operational incidents, Greenock was actually the quietest of our stations across the whole of Scotland that had 2 whole-time pumps, and that's out of the 38 again. And it more aligned to the operational time that Johnston and Renfrew typically spend at incidents. And again, just to give you an understanding of how much time Greenock spends at incidents, it's typically around about 93 to 94% of their available time, given it's a 24/7 station, is not spent operationally. So you're talking 67% of their time is spent at operational incidents. And when we look at the response times in the Inverclyde area, what we're typically seeing is that they're very, very generous within Inverclyde compared to other urban areas across Scotland. And the removal of the second pump at Greenock still left us with a first pump response time, which is about 1 minute 22 seconds faster than the typical for other urban, and for the second pump 1 minute 29 faster than the typical benchmark for other urban. So all of that leads us to think that maybe there is some over provision of resource in the Inverclyde area. So then more recently, we've also had to consider our resource budget, and what we've been asked to do by our senior leadership team was to look at how we could make savings. And given that every whole-time pump in the country costs us about £1 million per year to run, and that we had to make savings within this financial year, the only way we could effectively do that was to look at removing some of our whole-time pumps on a temporary basis. So what we did, rather than impacting at all on our first pump response times, so the time that it takes to get that initial pump to the incident, we looked at stations where we had 2 whole-time pumps, of which there are 40 in Scotland. And what we did was modelled the removal of one of the pumps from each of those 40 stations, and then we basically categorised the impacts based on response time initially to have kind of a ranking order of which ones created the least impact through their removal. And through that, we found that the removal of the Greenock second pump actually had the 7th least impact out of those 40 pump removals across the whole of Scotland. But we didn't leave it just there because we wanted to look more closely. We didn't just want to look at response times. And in some areas, we were seeing we could potentially remove more than 1 whole-time pump from adjacent stations, or certainly stations in the same rough vicinity. So we then did a full modelling of 10 pumps removed across the country and to see what the impacts would be cumulatively. What I can say for the Inverclyde area is that none of the impacts across the rest of the country impact at all in the Inverclyde area. It was purely the Greenock pump that was making a difference. And that's down to the geographical separation of Greenock from the other resources that we were looking at. So other things we were looking at as well was, what's that pump coverage in terms of the local geography? What's the impact in the local resilience? So, where are additional pumps coming from if we had larger incidents and how long would they take to get there. And also we had to look at some of our national specialist responses that we run from some of our stations as well, specialist assets. And finally, we also had to look at the impact in terms of removing or relocating some of our staff from stations where these temporary pump removals were going to happen, and making sure those were minimised as well and were actually feasible. So that's the process we went through in terms of the first and second pump response times and the combined removals as well. And then we carried out impact assessments for all the 10 stations where the impact assessment, where they considered to be the least impacts. And we were looking at community risk within those areas, what the operational resilience looked like, what are non-operational demands, so what were the impacts in terms of the crew training and the other kind of community safety activities that they would carry out normally. Obviously looking at the savings that we could be made, where obviously we're looking very carefully at legal compliance in terms of contractual and other requirements, and we're seeing again understanding of what the overall impacts were on a wide variety of measures. So the primary aim of the process all along has been to ensure that in terms of operational response, the impacts are limited and stay within or close to our national response benchmarks that we've identified, as I explained. And by applying an approach, we're very confident that we're not going to impact and compromise community safety and firefighter demand to any great extent. So it tends to be where there's, in terms of the risk and demand, there's seemed to be a slight over provision. Those are the areas where the least impacts were seen. So they also will make significant financial impacts for us over this financial year. But what you need to be very much sure of is that any permanent changes will go to full public consultation, and there will be various options will be brought forward over the next year or two for the Inverclyde area, and types of solution that we can't kind of bring forward within this timescale of one financial year will all be offered up as well, as to how we can reallocate the resources to better fit the risk and demand for the Inverclyde area. So that's the overall kind of view in terms of the process we went through. And just very quickly, this graph here shows a distribution of stations across the whole of Scotland by their incident time over a 5-year period. These red diamonds that you're seeing diagonally across here, these are all of our 2-pump stations. The purple diamonds to the left here are 3-pump whole-time retained stations. Greenock is the bottom one there. And the purple diamonds and the red circles are our 1-pump, or stations where we have 1 whole-time pump. So what you can see, for the money we're spending at Greenock, we're not getting an awful lot of incident time. In fact, it's the quietest, as I mentioned before, in terms of our stations where we have 2 whole-time pumps. So just give you some kind of context in terms of how busy Greenock actually is. And hopefully you've heard all that clearly, and that's everything from me. Okay, I'll just stop presenting.
Thank you, Mark. Before I bring in councillors, could I just ask you a couple of questions? Did you say that Greenock was the quietest station locally?
It's the quietest station across Scotland that has 2 whole-time pumps. So we have a large number of stations with 2 or more whole-time pumps, and of the 40 stations with 2 or whole-time pumps, Greenock is the quietest in terms of its time at incidents.
Thank you. And you also said there was over provision in Greenock. Is that tied in with it being quiet?
No, what I said was that there was potential over provision. So we're still assessing what's suitable provision for risk and demand, but we're certainly seeing a heavier weighting of resources in the Inverclyde area for the risk and demand than we're seeing in other areas.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think I'll take some questions. Is that okay, David, before we move on? Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to Mark for the presentation, which I think a wee bit better informed by getting that presentation. I think there'll be quite a number of detailed questions probably coming from colleagues this afternoon, but I wanted to sort of focus on how we got to be here today, to be perfectly honest, having an emergency meeting of this panel in the July holiday period, if you bear with me. So we've received very strong representations from your workforce through their trade union, and they were out protesting in the Civic Square there earlier on. We had a briefing from them. I've had a meeting with them directly myself. They had a public meeting recently in Group Bowling Club, Park Bowling Club, etc. Right, and you don't seem to have taken your workforce with you in terms of taking forward this particular change. So it would be useful to understand, I suppose, what consultation, if any, has taken place with workforce who clearly have very serious concerns about how they're affected directly, but serious concerns about the potential implications for the local community. I would like to understand what role the National Board has played in oversight of these service changes, and I'd like to understand what role you feel that the Scrutiny Committee should have or should have had in terms of these changes. I'm not a member of the Scrutiny Committee at the moment, you're not substituting, but I have heard some feedback from previous Scrutiny Committees, and I did watch the video of the last Scrutiny Committee, and it's typically the police get a hard time at the Scrutiny Committee, and the fire service got off pretty lightly. And the video of the last meeting reflects that. The vast majority of the time was spent scrutinising the performance of the police, and I think you got a quick 5 minutes at the end of it. You presented your report, I read your report, I didn't see anything in the report about this. And then in terms of the presentation, I didn't see anything about this in the presentation. So it would be useful to understand what you view as the role of this Scrutiny Committee when it comes to these type of service changes, which we as lay people would perceive to be pretty significant as a change. Now, Mark did mention that if we're going forward in terms of permanent changes, that there will be a public consultation, so it would be useful to understand again what role that we may have in that. And I suppose related to that point is how temporary in a sense are these changes, and what will be the process of evaluation that takes place before, in a sense, any permanent proposals are brought forward.
Thank you. I will let David do his bit before I bring anybody else in. That's
Thanks, Councillor, quite a lot. I think there's about 4 questions, so I'll take them one at a time if I can. Consideration of the workforce. This area has always prided itself in its relationship with the staff, including myself. I've been in and out of Edinburgh Place since 2009. I think I know most staff members, maybe it's some new trainees that I haven't quite met yet, but I've engaged with them all, including the local reps, and that was both face to face on the day that the Assistant Chief released the video to talk about SSRP. I drove down and spoke to, I think it was Blue Watch, so I've spoken personally, asked us Paul and Collins, all the staff, and talked about the direction of travel. This process was reasonably quick in the sense that the Chief Officer sat last year at the Justice Committee and spoke to the committee and outlined what a flat cash budget may or may not look like for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. When that came to fruition earlier on this year, SDNP that Mark's just talked about started the work around SSRP and what £11 million effectively of savings might mean to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Now, if we look at the last 10 years of the organisation, whether it's going from 23 principal officers down to 5, whether it's 8 control rooms down to 3, 8 legacy services down to 1, the direction of travel that we've had in terms of rationalising posts, whether it's flexi duty officers, support staff posts, whether it's been getting capital receipts through headquarters buildings being realised, the organisation over the course of the last 10 years still provided that emergency service to the people, not just in Edinburgh but for Scotland. So we've demonstrated over the course of the last 10 years that we can provide efficiency while still providing a first-class emergency service. However, the Chief outlined in the Justice Committee what a flat cash budget may look like, and that resulted in us needing £100 million of efficiency savings. So the work through SSRP meant that when they looked at the least impacted appliances, so that involves everything from the discussion that Mark just had and what that would mean in terms of context. So the first question about consideration of the workforce, I appreciate and understand our firefighters representing through the right body and to elected officials about the provision within Inverclyde. And there is no one passionate in this room about delivery of fire and rescue provision in this area of me. There is nobody more passionate than me. I'm legally responsible for this. So not just the provision of the delivery of the service, but also the relationship with staff, for me, is vital to bring them on that journey. So we had a relatively limited amount of time to what this might look like in terms of the temporary removal. Having said that, the proposal and the timeline for September later on here gives us time to have more dialogue around that. But it's my job to have that chat with the staff, some of which I met outside before Paul and I came in. In terms of the second question,
David, can I just come back to this question before you move on? Now, if we're going through a service change within the councils,
yes,
right, albeit temporary and whatever, right, or permanent, we do have that engagement with our workforce, right? We obviously seek to take that workforce with us, because if we don't take workforce with us, we could end up in a dispute situation, right? And I would politely suggest the fact that you've got fire officers out in Clyde Square today protesting means that you've not taken your workforce with you, right? And to me, that's a bit of a failure. So I would hope that the fire service, not just locally, regionally, but nationally, would reflect on that, because these type of, I don't know if many of these scrutiny meetings are taking place, but there's certainly a lot of representation, a lot of protests, a lot of petitions going across the affected areas. And it's no good for the fire service, it's no good for public confidence in the fire service when you end up in a situation like this, which could have potentially been avoided.
Well, if you think about the narrative and the communication that we've had from the audio, both at a local and a national level, it's certainly not been directed at myself or any of the officers in the area, or indeed the service nationally. They understand the financial position that we find ourselves in, and all the stuff that I've outlined to you in terms of the efficiencies that the organisation saved over the last 10 years. I think our record stands up to anybody, but yeah, there'll be frustration among staff. Of course, there will be any perception of any change. My job is to make sure that the local context, in conjunction with what the organisation is trying to do nationally, fits with the financial envelope that we find ourselves in.
No, and I'm not directing those comments at you, David, or any other local management, right? I understand the difficult position you're in. We may well come to a views a panel where we direct our concerns to, but I just think, to me, as an observer, as we're in a scrutiny role, we're part of the system. The government decided to withdraw the elected boards and replace it with a national board and bring in a system of scrutiny panels. So we've got a role, an important role to tell us, and I'm reflecting my view as a temporary member of this scrutiny panel, that to end up in a situation like this, no, we're not seeing the withdrawal of labour at this point in time, we're not seeing the threats of industrial action in some way, right? But we've got firefighters on the street telling us they don't believe these proposals are safe for our community or safe for their members. That's not a good situation to be in, and I would hope that whatever we decide today, you relay that message back to your line managers.
And that probably brings me on to your third question about what this panel is here for. So myself and Paul, our group commander, station commander, with us in front of this panel, talking about the scrutiny of the local fire plans and how we perform. That's our job. Our job is to sit here and answer questions that the panel have on a quarterly basis, or in this case, on a special panel. But what we do is provide information that's factual, we provide information that's correct, and we'll be scrutinised according to that. And that includes the relationships with the staff. And my job in advance of any proposed changes up until September is to make sure that we do take them on that journey with us, and I appreciate your comments about the nature of firefighting out there. That's their right to do that. I support them in doing that. My job is to make sure that in conjunction with the service nationally, that we deliver what we can against the financial backdrop. I think we can for this instance. That's absolutely fine.
Carry on, David.
And the final point about how temporary, the reason the organisation, in terms of trying to save this money in year one, is that there wasn't time to do that full consultation, bear in mind the timeline with the flat cash budget and other budgetary pressures that we had. So they've said temporary, any permanent change to structure, no, not necessarily an appliance or an operational decision, any permanent change to structure will have to go through a full consultation.
You did miss one point, David, which was just about the national board, right? So it was to understand what role the national board played in scrutinising this, or was it purely a decision by the chief higher officer?
The role of the board of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is to satisfy itself that the process by which we have followed as an organisation to get to that point, to inform the process of SSRP is sound. So whilst they will defer to the chief and the principal management in terms of any operational decisions and what that would look like locally in conjunction with the chief and myself, they satisfy themselves with the process. So what Mark's outlined in terms of the information that's gleaned to inform this process is sound. So their scrutiny is not necessarily around the final decision, but the process by which we followed to get to that point, and they've satisfied themselves that they've done that.
Okay, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you. I concur with what Councillor McCabe has asked you. My questions are more local, maybe a bit more pointed, so if you'd bear with me. I have 4 questions. The first one is the high-rise appliance in Greenock with a crew 2. I've been led to understand it's to be kept for specific high-rise incidents only. Is this a Scotland-wide policy?
So the phasing out of the aerial rescue pumps, just so we don't think it's solely high-rise buildings, it's a high-reach appliance. So the vast majority of the time we use these for water towers, instance where the environment needs to be contained. A number of these appliances were brought into service in the legacy services, and they combine what's effectively a fire engine, a food tap, and high-reach capability over a period of time. They've not quite been sufficient as the service would have liked, and even the legacy services. So nationally, these ARPs are still used as CAV. They are being phased out for high-reach appliances, for designated high-reach appliances.
Yes, so my question was that's to be kept only for specific high-reach.
Yeah, so if you think
with its crew too.
Yes, so that would, if we had a dedicated high-reach appliance, it would have a crew cap or 2 members of staff. So that would be an officer in charge, and that would be an operator. So in terms of that appliance only being used for that, we have predetermined attendances, which means that appliance will form part of that predetermined attendance. If you get a specific incident in a building that requires what we call a PDA, it will mobilise. However, it's always available at the discretion of incident commanders when they require that on scene. So there's 2 ways in which that can go.
So it can be used for other things.
It can be used for other things.
A second question, bear with me.
Yes.
There are currently, like you said, 2 whole-time appliances for the whole of Inverclyde.
Yes.
Like you said, Inverclyde is isolated. It's quite a unique area. It's got a long coastline. It's got main String Road, which is busy and has its own problems, a general hospital, football stadium, expanding housing estates. There's 13 high-rise buildings in Inverclyde. There's a high density of tenements as well. And along with the 2 full-time appliances, there's Skelmerley Gourock, which is retained. Port Glasgow, which I understand is just working unretained at the moment because of a lack of crew. No. So even with that then, there's more reliance on on-call firefighters, which seemingly can't be relied upon due to just the factors, not living near the station, ill children, roadworks, weather, road traffic accidents, etc. That mean that it's not fit for purpose in Inverclyde. Do you agree that this, along with recruitment and retainment issues that on-call has, that reliance on these cannot be guaranteed when the 2 or 1 or 2 of the whole-time appliances are deployed elsewhere the area?
And simple answer, no.
Okay.
That entirely. Our on-call staff in Inverclyde and beyond in Scotland and across the United Kingdom live and work in Inverclyde, and they see fit to give up their own time, the family time, the personal time to carry a pager and provide an operational response. They'll either do an extra 90 hours a week over and above their primary employment or 120 hours a week, depending on the contract they're deployed under. We don't force them to do that. We are hugely appreciative of what on-call firefighters do in Inverclyde, and they do it well. They do it across the UK. Over 70% of the UK is covered by on-call firefighters. They provide an outrageously impressive and valuable resource for us. I think some of our crews, both at Greenock, if you just want to finish, this is really important. I think our crews, particularly at Europe and Greenock, would be very surprised with 95% availability to be tagged as unreliable.
This is not, and this is definitely not
No,
a
it's important.
point or criticism of the retained ones at all, which I understand are an excellent part of the
Yes.
fire set. This is to do with the conditions that they work under
Yes.
and their pay, etc., and recruitment and retainment of them. It's certainly not a criticism of them, which I understand from your colleagues are invaluable. My third question, you've answered that no anyway. The last week's meeting that we had with the union pointed out to us that Westminster's cuts funding on a bigger scale to the English service, and they're in their bones. They're not funding the service in England to a safe level. So we are unlikely to get any, and consequentially there any other funding coming our way from that source. Every public service dispute in Scotland, which me and my colleagues have supported, has fought for their sector and to a greater or lesser extent been successful in reaching some kind of agreement. Do you feel your sector's done or is doing the same, i.e. proper consultation, negotiation with union and information sharing? And I know I'm kind of overlapping with Councillor McCabe's question on that.
The senior leadership of the organisation meet regularly with their red bodies. I know they've been in dialogue throughout this process. Like I said right at the start of my information, that the Chief has outlined to government what this means in terms of public finance. We look at the budget that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service has, £308 million, a capital budget of £34 million, in comparison to other public sector bodies, including Aberdeen Council. That is not a lot of money for the whole of Scotland to deliver assets in terms of property, in terms of fleet, in terms of new equipment, in terms of research and development. But yet we still do it. The organisation still delivers and continues to deliver an emergency service. It doesn't prioritise calls that responds as and when they do. So my answer to you is, I think we have proved, not just to members at this table, hopefully across the organisation and across Scotland, that we still deliver first-class emergency service. However, if there's more finance available and investment into fire and rescue service, then I would help them.
With respect, that wasn't my question. It was about consultation negotiation. My fourth question is, taking into account that we all have an interest in public safety.
Yes.
Do you want to run the fire service as it exists at the very least, or as is proposed?
If you're asking me if there's any difference between what is proposed pre-1st of September and post, as the local senior officer, I need to look at not just the local context in terms of the 3 local authorities that we cover, but also the national context. And I have to understand that whilst this panel will scrutinise me on delivery within Inverclyde, the Fire and Rescue Service of Scotland expands beyond that, and the delivery of resource, not just in Inverclyde, relies on resource outside of Inverclyde as well. Inverclyde and other neighbouring local authorities rely on Inverclyde as well. It is a Scottish service. So my job is to make sure that within the financial involvement we have, that I contribute both locally within Inverclyde and nationally in Scotland. So to answer your question, I will always do the best with the resource that I have.
Thanks for your answers. Only one comment at the end, because of what you said at the end about being the quietest and the operational work really low. Just from an eye point of view, I would think that I know that the fire service do lots and lots of preventative work,
yes.
And therefore that huge amount of work that they do, rather than operational putting out fires, to me is preferable. No less is preferable to them being really, really busy, and that's just a comment. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks very much for your answers.
It's important to know the preventative work that the fire and rescue do on a daily basis. The operational crews are supported not just by the on-call staff that we've all talked about, but supported by protection officers, but supported by a community action team who look at the non-domestic through youth engagement and a lot of good work that we do in schools and partners at pub meetings. So a lot of that preventative work will still continue. Nothing.
Yes, I understand that.
But that's where I would be, myself and Paul would be here to be scrutinised on that.
Councillor Clougherty.
Thank you, Dina. I suppose carrying on with Sanders, I appreciate that as we call it fire prevention service, because that's what it's doing as well. It's very much prevention. From what time of year you can buy control to great initiatives that you're doing to fight fires. Then we're going to say, well, we never done that, there'd be more fires, and we're going to be in the position now to lose an engine. So, swings and roundabouts, I would certainly prefer prevention element and not be punished because of that prevention element that's a bit scope. If I can touch on Mark's data, Mark's spent a lot of time on the data because this is definitely data driven. Now, for instance, myself, if I was to use my data in the last 10 years for holidays, I've not claimed my travel insurance once. So the next time I'm going on holiday, I'm going to take my travel insurance because the data tells me I don't need it. And then something happens in holiday, what happens? I mean, no, I'm not being a wee bit facetious there, but the fire service for us is an insurance policy that we're willing to go through and pay for in order to do a bad fire within the climate. And I think from a community point of view, we're all willing to do that. So we see it as a prevention service, and we also see it as we're willing to do that just in case that day comes when, heaven forbid, one of the high fire sources and fire, heaven forbid, the cruise line or something happens to the cruise line and they didn't need a rescue on that. So I think that's my preamble, and sorry for that. I suppose, going back to the actual data, Mark spent a lot of time talking about what get fed into data. And the things he was saying was things like the socio-economic mix of the area, the SMID in the area. And we in Inverclyde are looking back and we're saying, well, okay, if you're churning that through, how on earth do you actually say, well, Inverclyde could be targeted since we've got some of the worst SMIDs in Scotland, including the worst in one area, close to the fire station. And you also say, well, look at our socio-economic plan. And you're saying, well, if you're using that data, and using that data, how have you got to this answer? And I don't know if Mark's still there, but how much weight, he says things like social and economic, he says things like SMID, but how much weight did I actually give to the answer to the move and applying to the game? It seems if we were doing that, then the weight would be towards Inverclyde, if that makes sense to you.
I'll bring Mark in, he's still on the call, but just that this is probably the bit that I think a lot of people looking in have struggled with. When we look into the fire stations, within Inverclyde, whether it's 3, 1st, 2nd post, there are 7 vehicles available for fire and rescue delivery within Inverclyde. Same number of vehicles that are there today. The only difference being that the aerial rescue pump that sits within Greenup, which is 16 years old now, I have to say, will be protected just to be used for high risk provision when it's required. So the same amount of assets remain within Inverclyde. We've taken receipt of a 71 plate appliance fire engine, whatever one someone wants to call it, the normal term. That's an investment of around £354,000 in the latest technology produced for firefighters. Taking the hydraulic rescue equipment off it, now the power battery operated rescue equipment. So we are investing in new technology, not just for fire safety, but for community safety as well. So the same number of vehicles remain within Inverclyde. What we've managed to navigate through SSRP and through the Service Delivery Model Programme and the HIDE strategy is to lessen the impact both on firefighter numbers and also on the impact that would be on those firefighters having to move either somewhere else within Inverclyde or certainly facilitate transfers. So I think it's important to stress that, Chair, that the same amount of assets, so we talk about losing appliances, the same amount of physical assets will remain within Inverclyde post the first time.
What about firemen? Will the same number of firemen?
So in terms of posts that are displaced, and again, some of the comments have been rather unhelpful, I have to say, what the minimum operating level currently is 45. So we could go above that. In simple terms, 5 firefighters on the first 5 and 4 firefighters on the second 5. With 5 shifts, that's 45. It's in the paper. With the crew model for the aerial rescue pump being 2, that means we only need 7 minimum. So I could put, for example, through the work that Paul's doing, we could put what we call buffer posts in there, which means we could less impact even further. The what it would mean in practice if we displaced those 10 posts would be 10 firefighters displaced to give to other stations to bring their crew models up. That doesn't mean anyone being made redundant, you're only losing your job. And in some cases, we could actually facilitate life transfers that would suit some of the firefighters. What it would mean in practice, post the 1st of September, allows the same assets of the things, you know, the high reach plans will go into as such, and there'll be 5 firefighters on what's effectively the first of last.
And we heard earlier on there are vacancies within
We have some vacancies that are being also level both at and both levels. That's an opportunity for people to demonstrate that they're willing to take on that responsibility. But that forms part of all the work that Paul does with his other single points of contact. We have personnel reference across the West and across the country to make sure that we're lessen impact in any firefighters that might be involved in this. And again, back to Princeton Case President, that's part of the engagement that we have with firefighters as part of this process, and will do cheer up until the 1st of September.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn.
Thanks, Convener. So I might cover some stuff that's been discussed, but sometimes when things are really important, it's sometimes worth repeating certain things. I think I just want to start off by saying how much we value all our emergency services, but including our fire service. We've got, you know, it's not until we went out there today and seen all those members of our community out there with their families, you know, and how seriously they take their role and how seriously they take the safety of our community. That I just want to start by saying thanks to them and to yourselves. I'm just, you know, when I'm reading this, I'm probably just a wee bit disappointed is probably the word, because again, as a scrutiny panel, we're getting told and we're not getting consulted, so we're getting told pretty much this is what's happening. I feel like it's going through as a temporary, because I think the saying is there was no time to do the proper consultation, so we'll just put it through as temporary, and then the consultation would follow. The lack of, you know, we always talk about in here about partnership working, and the partnership is great among everyone, but with partnership working, we are really looking for that consultation and even a discussion. So probably this is not personal, David, but I'm a bit disappointed in that partnership as near the work that we're getting told about temporary change, which looks pretty serious for being a temporary change. We'll go back to those firefighters out there. We're sending someone off to maybe a different area and we're going to bring them back again, just upsetting their day to day. It doesn't really feel very temporary, it feels very much permanent, it's just a time. So I'm not, obviously we understand, as mentioned before, I understand that there's budget cuts all over and you know, things will be cut, but it's obviously it's that cost versus risk. So we're reducing costs, but there will be an increased risk. So it's just where on the line do we accept the risk, you know? So firefighters are obviously not wanting to take any risk. We're sitting here, we're getting here representing the public. We're not wanting to take any additional risk. So probably my question is, who is responsible? Clearly, if we cut services, there will be a risk. It's just someone's decided there's a risk they're willing to take. So really what I'm trying to establish is who is responsible for that additional risk, and are they happy to take that risk? And clearly that's where our representation needs to go to. The person that's willing to take the extra risk to say, you're happy to take the risk, but we're really uncomfortable with that additional risk.
David, do you want to answer that, please?
That would be me. That would be me. There are 2 people listed in the Fire Scotland Act as having legal responsibility. And actually one's the chief, one under section 41G myself. So I have to satisfy myself that those firefighters out in our firefighters are safe, in conjunction with all the planning, the data, the financial background, the political challenges the organisation faces. I'm ultimately responsible, and that's why I said right at the start, nobody takes this more seriously than me. Those firefighters are my responsibility. I do take that very seriously. I've been in and around Inverclyde for the last 8-9 years. It's an area that I'm hugely passionate about. It's a service delivery model that I'm hugely passionate about. That's long-haul staff, whether it's the ground staff, but also it's time. And that's why this panel is central. We said at the start it's so important that it don't need that time. The police calls that time for service delivery in Inverclyde. And I'm happy to face that scrutiny, but I have to take that in the context of what the service is trying to achieve nationally and what that may or may not impact me locally, whether that's within Inverclyde, whether it's within Venture, whether it's within Stretcher. I need to satisfy myself, the local senior officer, that what is being proposed is safe, is proportionate, it's consistent with what's happening across Scotland. and on this occasion I am. But it's my job, and it's Paul's job, and the sector officer team to make sure that moving forward on a daily basis, which we do, we analyse performance, we analyse staff engagement, and we look at those response times to make sure that everything that's been proposed and the worries of people don't come to fruition. That's our job, and it's been our job before SSRP, it's been our job before SDMP. This is literally our responsibility on a day-to-day basis, regardless of whether it's bringing something new in or whether it's just our normal ladder. I mean, this is what we're responsible for. But ultimately, to answer the question, quite directly, it's me, and I take that responsibility.
Thank you for that, David. Natasha?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Just because I know earlier
Yes,
there
we
was
can.
issues. Oh, excellent. Okay, so first of all, can I just confirm with Port Glasgow, I couldn't quite see your reaction, but is it the case that Port Glasgow currently has no crew? Is that correct?
Port Glasgow has two appliances that operate at the station. One is a whole-time appliance and one is an on-call appliance. I think it's fair to say, Paul, certainly in the short term, we've had some staff absence from there, but we've also managed to recruit 2 or 3 people into units. So we have had some short-term staffing challenges. That is a historical thing, not just in the whole time, but also in the on-call environment. But we are working through that again, back to Council President. That's our responsibility to make sure that provision is made. But yes, I think we have to say that there have been some crewing issues in the short term in terms of us.
Thank you. Anything else, Natasha?
Yes, sorry, Chair, I do have a couple of questions. My second question is around the Community Risk Index model. Is there a local report of this that we could see as a scrutiny panel specifically for Inverclyde? Because I think that would be really helpful to us to understand the sort of things that are being said in that report to help us understand maybe what you're seeing and how those decisions are being made.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a question certainly that we'll walk to the officers and ask the SDMP team just as we move through this process. I think what we're working towards is to get a version of the data that makes sense. I think it's all raw data in there that if we presented to us and members of staff, I don't think it would make any sense. They have obviously employed the services of an external body, both in the top here at the University of Edinburgh and Nottingham. So I think we're trying to get a version of that, councillor, that would make sense in conjunction with those local impact assessments. But as soon as that's available, I'll make it available to them.
And any time on that, David?
No, I think the time next Mark, if it's still in content, give me some context.
It would be good at some stage to bring that to the panel. Okay, thank you. Natasha, one more question.
Perfect. Okay, if I've only got one, I'll choose this one. So earlier on, your colleague who gave the very interesting presentation was talking about response times over the past 5 years, and that was the view that we were given was over the past 5 years. But we've been approached, as many people have alluded to earlier, with concerns about more recent response times or lack of response. I think what we were hearing was that 30% responses failed to meet 5-minute response time, which I understand from the presentation that there's no Scottish-wide target set. However, that's still concerned that a third of calls weren't answered within the local time given. But secondly, almost 1 in 10 calls, 9% of calls, there's no mobilisation at all. That already suggests to me as a layperson that there is maybe an issue with making sure that when there is an incident that's being responded to. And I'm just concerned that with what's been suggested, albeit you're saying that the number of assets will remain the same, that the changes might impact on those responses and we might see, fortunately, more casualties or more fires causing greater levels of damage within our community.
That's a really good question. Suppose one of the things I'm probably disappointed about is that, not saying Mark, let me just pause for the Mark effect here. Mark and his team have worked on data and the analysis of data for, the data period is over 8 years, which has informed the process that we find ourselves involved in. The 9% councillor that you refer to talks about 14 did not mobilise for call, and this is talking about on-call staff here. And that was taken over a period of the 1st of June to the 26th of June 2023. Not exactly a massive data set, but even if we look at the 14 non-mobilisations, actually, and I've taken it, you can see that councillor, I have them here. If a bit of digging had been done into those that did not mobilise, they would find that there was no requirement to mobilise. So for one example, on-call staff having a pager test at the station when they're on the drill night. So there was no incident to attend. so there was no technology mobilised. On other occasions, when the crew attended the station, the second full-time appliance had become available and was proposed before them. So they did not mobilise because they were told by control not to mobilise. So on every occasion that we have to serve outside one which was in an area, those did not mobilise, where in fact did not mobilise. This is the data that we have on a daily basis. So to go into a system and very briefly look at that to find something that appears to present something, we need to look deeper than that. This is what we do on a daily basis. So none of those did not mobilise. The chair, I'm happy if you have that detail. But what it unfortunately does, again, puts a point across that our on-call staff are unavailable when in fact they are. The 3 watch commanders that work in on-call stations have combined service to fire and rescue of about 150 years, including the crew commander. These are not junior officers, these are people that care passionately about fire and rescue prevention and interclaim. And you can imagine when statistics like that are presented to them that they would take that pretty personally. And you can hopefully hear in my voice, I take that quite personally as well, because the on-call staff provide a valuable service here. So when statistics are presented to elected officials, to committee members, to panel members, it's absolutely right that you scrutinise me on them. I just want to make sure that the figures that are put in front of you are based on fact, not opinion, not allegation. So you have to be based in fact. Paul and I are also be accountable to that. But just on that one point, Councillor, if they're honest about, those did not mobilise. That 9% presented on those 25-day stats. No basis of action.
Thank you, David. I think that's clear. James?
I think Councillor Wallace.
No, I think you were first. You haven't had a chance yet.
How comfortable would you be if a large-scale incident occurred that you had to lead and you had to use the resources of the proposed capacity curve to what you have available now?
Just ignore that.
When things like this come about, when conversations come about fire and rescue, and indeed police colleagues, we can paint a number of scenarios that would draw appliances away somewhere else. We've taught primary school kids for years not to phone 999, to not redirect resources away from where they might need to be. The 1st of July, we brought in the UFAS policy to make sure that we're trying to drive down a lot of the false alarms that you see within the report. Why? Because we want appliances to be available for when they're required. But we have well-versed protocols in terms of spray conditions, bonfire night, large-scale incidents either in city centres or in with. And the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service bends and flex. Any committee members that have gone to speak to our colleagues in Operation Control will show them what a well-oiled machine that is in terms of managing current events. So to answer your question, very comfortable. This is what we are describing as day-to-day operation for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. We have done this ad infinitum. This is what we do. So if there are current events, if there are spray conditions, if there are ongoing incidents, we will deal with it. We always have and we always will.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yes, sure.
Answer. You talked about bending and flexing, right? But there's only so much bending and flexing things can do before they break. So, in your opinion, how close are we to breaking?
Yeah. Not even close. On a normal day-to-day running of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, if you think about 365 days in the year, break that down into a day shift and a night shift, that's about maths is not very good, but it's about 730 shifts. And it's contained within the paper. The way in which the service crew operates, not just in terms of the attrition rate, but the absence rate that we see on a daily basis. Some appliances have to be put off the run either for part of a shift or a full shift, and that means that we will deploy those firefighters out. The council have touched on this to other stations, but professional firefighters, they know what they're doing, they will go to that station and they will tend back through. What that means is we have a number of multi-station appliances that will, either for a period of time, drop a second appliance, and that we have a number of stations across the west that we will do in sequential order to lessen the impact of that whilst putting other resources up. So again, what we're proposing here isn't any different than what, it's not every day. So I think out of 730 shifts, you're probably about on 280 occasions, the main second pump will go off the run to put other appliances on. And that's similar across multi-pump stations in the city of Glasgow, with an Ayrshire, with an Lanarkshire. So it's different, a very important path in how we deliver our service. So there's nothing out with what is not necessarily a daily occurrence, but a fairly regular occurrence that the organisation will do to make sure that we still, across the country, provide that fire and rescue service on a comfort.
Okay, James.
Thank you, thanks.
Kirsty.
James just stole my question, so it's fine.
I must apologise. You were next, it wasn't James. I do apologise for that.
I know.
Councillor Moran.
Aye, thanks, Commissioner. Do you think you look at the thing on the whole, once again, Inverclyde has been singled out as a new target. If it's not a fire service or a police service or an NHS, there's always something, always seems to be Inverclyde is hit for everyone's going to harm to it. Now, we represent the people of Inverclyde, and it's our duty to scrutinise decisions made. And again, this feels as if somehow we've been singled out for special treatment, and it might not be the case, but it certainly feels that way to me. The other thing we ask you is, when we're talking to the firefighters there, and there will be some good transfer, if that's inevitable, with some compassion taken when you do that, you try and put to somewhere local. I mean, it'd be horrible to think that you're coming from Europe, you've got a station in Murrable, you're driving past over there to go to that station in Murrable. So I hope you would take some connections of that, if it does happen, that you would maybe speak to the officers, and if it was suitable for someone to move, it's fine. The other thing, David, well, we're on about statistics, right? And we know they can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But the fact that Greenock Fire Station was the quietest, would that not because they've been doing good preventive work throughout the whole time? And that's how it's quiet, because they managed to stop a site development before it happens. And the very last question I have is, they're saying, have you to any kind of actions on global warming? Because the last 6 years have been the hottest years ever. Now, that means that there'll be a bigger demand in our service than ever before. Now, I'm not criticising the service, but if it is a political decision that you need the resources to fully fund that service, then that's our job here, politicians, to do, to try and talk to other politicians and to see the light and give you the resources you require to do your job. But I say to you, we never did people Inverclyde, and it always feels as if it's Inverclyde who's always getting the raw end of the stick, if that's the right terminology.
Councillor, I know you've been scrutinising fire for a number of years.
Well, I know. I remember the good old days.
I know you've got a long history. I genuinely welcome, from what you said, your first question around Inverclyde, well, comment that Inverclyde being singled out. I think in conjunction with the Heights strategy and with SSRP, I think we've managed to negotiate something that will lessen the impact, not just in terms of firefighting numbers, which brings me on to my second point about firefighters being displaced. It's in no interest to me to move firefighters further away from their home addresses. We have a number of firefighters within Greenock Fire Station that have live transfers in to other local authority areas, so to get them a bit closer to home. So composition of crews and skills to get their plans out the door will be one factor that we look into. But I would not disadvantage any firefighters. We have a policy of recompensing firefighters that we can move further away from their home address, but I'm confident within Inverclyde that won't be the case. Like I said right at the start of the relationship that we've got with our firefighters, it's in my interest to keep people as happy as they can at their work, and part of that will be lessening the impact of the area. There might even be opportunities for some of them. I said we've got some junior officer vacancies, so there might be an opportunity for people to respond further. The preventative work, I couldn't disagree. I think one of the measures that Mark talked about wasn't necessarily about the quiet I think it was also about time spent at instance. But as I say, Mark and his team, I trust them with the work that they've done since 2019 and the data that they've presented. In fact, Councillor Elron mentioned about preventative work. A lot of that's also done with the community action team, which is a finite resource, but it does a very good job of delivering across the two authority areas. We've got meetings with Scotland, the data sharing, the information sharing that's there. We've also got our protection staff who deal with a lot of the non-domestic, but that work will continue with the effects that we have. So there's not an issue there. In terms of the environmental impact, One of the stories fairly recent at Fire and Rescue was that we spent £500,000 in the last 3 years in the station fabric in Inverclyde, and that I think that was a valuable use of resources. But which I thought was a rather strange story. I'm not going to lie, because it was investment in the working environment sort of firefighters. We talked earlier on about shared services. We have the underwater service team, the main policing team agreement since 2008, I believe, and the representatives from the Maritime Coast Guard Agency. So we are already within Greenup Fire Station having a multi-agency approach, and if nothing else, to share the financial burden of that building. So environmentally, we have a strategy for that. I'm happy to provide that document to the council, to the council officer, and part of that will be things like solar panels on stations. We now have electric vehicle charging facilities at all our stations, and we continue to do things like biomass boilers, etc. So that's all within the financial envelope that we are working with. But there is a plan for that moving forward, and the asset management team will prioritise that.
No, I was more talking about the wildfires that we were getting, especially June. It was the hottest June for over 100 years. And I know you were stretched, and you are overgone, basically. So my question would be is, if you're stretched to that limit and you get a real serious incident, does that put you in a situation where you might get abandoned one less serious incident to attend another one? If that's the case, it's the one.
In these instances that we need to take cognizance of, and that's why an asset management team look at how we deploy to them, the equipment that we use, where we deploy that. Again, for example, that research and development, what are the kinds of better techniques, tapping into things like the community access register, so that asset register, that we can draw on community support as well, and rural areas to help assist fires like that. But it's something that the organisation takes very seriously.
Thank you.
James, Kirsty, are they legacy lights?
No,
I know it's John. Are you coming back in? They're not a legacy.
I haven't actually been in, but
In you come, John.
okay, that's
In you
for
come.
thank you, Convener. I'd just like to thank the members for the questions that they've actually raised there, and obviously you sit down there, you get a list of questions that you're going to ask yourself. They've all been responded to. But the one I'd actually kind of looking at is that it's been through the community risk register, which highlights the risks that have the highest likelihood and potential to have significant impact, which could cause disruption to the Western Scotland region and its communities. Now, within that, there is also a Western Scotland Risk and Resilient Partnership, which I understand that Inverclyde Council is also part of, and that comprises organisations which are legally required to prepare for, respond to and recover from any major disruption or emergency. Have you discussed with these partnerships the potential impact of the reduction in the crew services and the appliances within Inverclyde? And also, how would we address the general public perception where if they see a reduction, rather than saving lives, potentially costing lives?
So to answer your question, we employ what we would call a civil contingencies officer who sits within the West RRP, and they are absolutely pivotal from a fire and rescue perspective as one of the responders in terms of how we would respond to major instance. And that happens across Scotland, not just in Inverclyde, for all those sites that would be of interest to a multi-agency response. And our response to those plans isn't based on locality appliances, it's based on fire and rescue's ability to deploy. So that would be considered in the round, and then that's up to us to look at that on a deployment basis. Councillor.
Okay.
Okay, John.
Okay.
Kirsty.
thank you, Convener. Just kind of going back to Councillor McCabe's point earlier about taking your team along with you. The first notes that I read, that I wrote, during our meeting there with the union was they said about public safety being under threat and firefighters being under threat by these proposals. When in here you've said that you're not even close to breaking point, I'm struggling to see which version of that is the actual reality here, because you have people, as we've said, on the streets protesting about those specific things. So how do you move forward, and how do you bring your team forward with you in these conditions when you're at complete polar opposites end of the scale from what I can see?
Having been in this area for a number of years and knowing the staff members that are out there, I understand publicly that they can do this, and privately we can have those conversations with them. But we're not at polar ends of the spectrum. My job, along with the Everclear cluster team, has been for a number of years and moving forward, but we to look at the daily operational ask of our fire crews, and that's everything from operational incidents to assessment over the phone in terms of community safety, in terms of public events. Everything that our fire and rescue teams do, we scrutinise on an almost daily basis. So I'm not convinced here, and when we talk about the ad hoc way in which we take the appliances off, that has become, whether you agree with it or not, has become the way in which we deliver our model. So I'm not at the end of the spectrum where I think we're at the breaking point. I genuinely am. And if I was, those daily scrutiny arrangements would allow me or certainly not allow me to sit here in the future and face questions from yourself if I didn't think there was any basis or a solid basis to answer those questions.
How would you convince your firefighters of that?
On a daily basis. The delivery model that we are currently operating, bear in mind that I obviously talked about aerial fleet and the reason why we're replacing these ARPs, the delivery model that we are currently working through will be no different than what we're doing. Generally speaking, what my job is, what Paul's job is, and cost officers is to monitor incident activity to make sure that our on-call staff are recruiting, are retained, are providing the contractual obligations they do to make sure that those support resources, not just here, but in neighbouring areas are available. That's our job. But we're not at the stage that I think our colleagues publicly say we are.
So you're really saying that you can handle any loss of an appliance or staff?
What I can say is that the crew model that's being proposed after September, Chair, I am comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. James?
Thanks, Gabriel. It's just a statement. So, our group's listened to the local reps of the Fire Brigade Union a couple of times now. We can't accept the significant risk to the safety of the community in Upper Clyde. So it's just to make the panel aware that we've made written representation to the Minister for Victims and Community Safety, Yvonne Brown, to request a review on funding, outlining the potential risk to our community in Upper Clyde and highlighting the fact that the Fire Brigade Union locally feel ignored in this decision by fire chiefs. And I will share that response to Alia when it comes in.
Is that a motion you're putting forward?
No. Does it have to be statement?
No. Just a statement. That's fine. Thank you, James. Thank you.
Chair, if I just respond to that.
Are you going to give us a statement as well?
No, I'm going to give the committee some reassurance and hopefully some counsel that some of the information that's presented to local officials recently has been could be somewhat misleading. So if there's something, a written response going to the Minister, you don't need to do this, I'm giving my counsels there. So if you want us to just confirm any statistical data that's contained within that so that it's accurate, I'm more than happy to make us available to do that. There's representation going to the Minister, I'd like to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe, I think this is the last question.
May well be a motion that you're looking for. But I've obviously listened.
I'm not looking for a motion.
Well, maybe we'll get one. I've obviously listened intently to what David said and a very robust defence of the proposals, and obviously equally robust criticism of the proposals from the Fire Brigade Union. And I suppose we are lay people, and we're not here in a sense to decide who's right or who's wrong. And there are obviously political processes that can be pursued, whether that's direct or motions to the council, etc. But this is a scrutiny committee, so I think we seek to try and avoid politicising this scrutiny committee. But I come back to some opening remarks. I just think it's deeply unfortunate we've got here today. Absolutely deeply unfortunate. and that there are similar protests going on across the affected areas. Seen plenty on social media in Aberdeen and Falkirk and Glasgow, places like that. And I just do think that these proposals may well be well intentioned and they might be the right proposals for the future, but they seem to me to being brought in haste in response to obviously financial pressures without proper consultation, I have to say, with the workforce and without proper scrutiny, I have to say, by the local scrutiny committees, because I think scrutinising after the event is no my idea of scrutiny, to be perfectly honest. It's about bringing, here are draft proposals, or want to get your views on them, or want to understand. And let's have a presentation. This is be active. This is us. This is the Fire Brigades Union contacting me contacting the chair and requesting we have a meeting, and we have this special meeting and you come along and react to a paper that our officers are prepared. So I do want to propose, Chair, that we as a scrutiny committee use the chair, write to the Chief Fire Officer and the Chair of the National Board, expressing our concerns about the way in which this matter has been handled, the lack of proper consultation in advance, and the lack of the opportunity for local scrutiny committees to properly scrutinise the proposals before they're actually implemented. So I would hope that the panel will support that proposal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay. You okay, David?
So, David,
I'm thinking. Heaven's sake, I can't rush into everything. I think it's quite reasonable for me to send a letter which you'll compose for me, which will appreciate both what we've heard from the FBU and more particularly what we've heard from local management, who did, and I agree with you, Stephen, very robustly defended a very difficult position because it's middle management that are left with the job of implementing these cuts when they've had nothing to do with it. You know, it's come from down from above. So as long as we're going above David and taking it above that, I'm very happy with that, with your proposal.
Yeah, David can obviously take the message back to himself because he did take some responsibility earlier on in terms of being current officer. But I do think our representation should be to the Chief Fire Officer and to the
Can you do that?
yes, so it's, the letter would be, the motion is writing for the convener to write to the Chief Fire Officer and Chair of the Board with, and I'll be specific about the different points if that's okay, with the engagement with unions prior to the change, concerns about the different messages about what's safe, and with appreciation that the local commander is working within the window of resources. Concerns specifically about the timeline of the announcement of the flat cash budget, and it didn't allow for consultation, that the National Board was simply there to ensure the process was sound, and although it's not the final outcome, you're disappointed as a committee at the lack of opportunity for consultation with the scrutiny panel ahead of that time, and also concerns that we want the specific issues for Inverclyde to be taken into account, particularly with access to information of the local report and the community impact assessment.
Yeah. Everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Are we unanimous?
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. So, thank you very much, everybody. I really would like to thank the senior police representative and senior fire representative for your arguments you put forward and for your disclosing of information to us, which has been extremely useful, extremely open, and a very worthwhile exercise. Thank you very much, both of you, and your aide de camp, Damien.
Thank you.